I now give the floor to the representative of Palau.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, let me thank the United Arab Emirates for convening this important and urgent meeting. Climate change has resulted in carnage very similar to that we've typically associated with war. Entire villages have been destroyed by extreme weather, resulting in vulnerable people without shelter. Agricultural projects have been destroyed by excess rain and wind and/or extreme droughts, resulting in food shortages and hunger. Palau has been witness to all of these and more. Last year, Typhoon Sergei destroyed 20% of our homes, key infrastructure, and wreaked havoc on our farms and reefs, threatening our food security. Which lets me turn to some of the questions posed in the concept note. Mr. President, we believe more ambition and more action is required at all levels of climate finance. The cover photo of the Economist's review of the IPCC report is of an older woman in a wheelchair being carried by presumably her sons through the flood that's devastated both her home and her neighborhood. This woman could be in any one of the SIDS countries, as this is a sobering reality in many of our countries today. She's in this position because, one, there hasn't been enough climate action on mitigation. We believe a focus on mitigation in G20 countries who emit the lion's share of emissions is imperative. In the last couple of years, we've seen a great amount of solidarity and multilateralism with respect to both COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. The sanctions against Russia have been enacted in record times. The central banks of the wealthiest countries engaged in $9 trillion of quantitative easing in 18 months. Finance flows and humanitarian aid have been mobilized in record speed. We've seen that multilateralism can indeed deliver swiftly, and we urge for similar levels of urgency in dealing with the climate crisis. For instance, through purchasing green energy bonds and eliminating fossil fuel subsidies. Secondly, Mr. President, the woman in the wheelchair is in her position because there hasn't been enough adaptation finance. We are encouraged by the doubling of adaptation finance from COP26. However, we want to make note that SIDS countries received only 2% of all adaptation finance available, and half of that was in the form of loans instead of grants, further burdening these already vulnerable countries. Because of our small sizes, we simply don't have the deal sizes required by many of the multinational institutions that are providing climate finance. Moreover, many SIDS countries don't have the technical expertise required for many of the application hurdles, as well as the data requirements. Mr. President, if we look at the traditional finance system in commercial banking, this was an issue that was addressed through various innovations. Because of the high cost of due diligence, traditional financiers often focused on larger deal sizes and proven customers with high credit scores. That left many vulnerable people with smaller incomes to be underbanked, crippling their ability to access capital to climb the rungs of the development ladder. It wasn't until the development of microlending and microfinance where smaller amounts of funding, accessed through non-traditional means, for instance, looking at cell phone bill payments rather than credit scores and delivering money through mobile phones, that allowed money to flow to these segments of society and helping them develop. Drawing on that lesson, we believe climate finance has also fallen into this trap of focusing on larger deals for many of the same reasons. While we welcome new initiatives like the GCF's readiness grants and catalyst funds that focus on capacity building and technical assistance, we also encourage the re-architecture and re-innovation of climate finance for SIDS countries. Instead of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, we urge for creative, implementable solutions that directly addresses the small-scale challenges of SIDS countries so we can increase the flow of funds and create direct impact on the ground. Panning back to the woman in the wheelchair, what happens next? There is little recourse for her currently. There is no loss and damage facility to help her. Perhaps she'll be lucky and find people to take her in. Perhaps she will end up like the over 200 million people who've been displaced as a result of climate change. This is why we believe loss and damage is a key part of the finance package to prevent conflict and instability. It would be the final lifeline for many people and a large step towards retaining peace and security. The fate of this woman is no less important than one that's currently displaced as a result of active armed conflict. The way we see it, she has been displaced by invisible bullets called carbon emissions. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Palau for their statement.